This video will introduce the distinction between populations and samples. So when we select a research participant, we select it from what's known as a population. So a population is defined as all individuals of interest in a particular study. These populations can vary in size and they're often quite large, which is why you don't typically use your entire population to participate in your research project. And you want your results to generalize to the population. So we have specific ways that we select our sample so that we can generalize those results to that population. So the sample is defined as a set of individuals that's selected from a population, and they are intended to represent the population in a research study. And again, we want them to represent the population so we can generalize the results from our sample to that population. So let's say, for example, this is our population. And, of course, times it by 10 or something like that. But it's a pretty diverse group of individuals. And we're going to say that our population is community college students. So again, why wouldn't we just take all community college students? That would be an awful lot of students, right? So maybe our sample could be students in Professor Ferguson's class. Now, this might not be a representative sample because maybe the students in my class are very one sort of particular type of niche, especially, I teach psychology, so I would only really have mainly psychology students. Is that truly representative of community college students? Well, it depends on what you're looking at, right? So, but the idea is that you have a population of interest and you select a sample. And we're going to talk in a later video about how we make sure that our sample is actually representative of that population. And just keeping in mind, when we look here, we see some differences, right? Hair color, maybe age. Those guys are things, biological sex, those are things that you can see differences, but there are things that you also can't see, like education level, socioeconomic status, IQ. There's all sorts of things that you can't see. So again, that's why it's important to use specific methods that we'll talk about in a later video to select that sample, rather than just taking students out of one professor's class. Now, we also said that our population of interest is this community college students. Now, realistically, can we sample community college students from all over the country or even all over California? So maybe we have an accessible population. So we have a target population, which is community college students, but then we have what we call an accessible population. And those are the populations accessible to us. So maybe we say, well, OCC is a diverse group of community college students, and that's our accessible population, and that's where we're going to pull those individuals from, making the assumption that they represent community college students as a whole. So these, while you might be familiar with the terms population and sample, the idea of target and accessible population is something that is an important distinction to understand as well. So again, this just kind of is, I think, a diagram from your textbook that talks about this target population is the entire set of individuals that have the characteristics required by the researcher, whereas the accessible population is the portion of individuals who are accessible, who we can actually sample for the study. And then the sample are the individuals that are actually selected. So again, here's that definition of target population, the group defined by the researcher's interests, and the accessible population, the people that the researcher can realistically involve in the study. So keeping in mind with our population and sample discussion that the goal of research is to generalize the sample to the population. I know we've talked about that previously, but that's something important to understand, is that when we're doing an experiment, we want to determine cause and effect, we have to make sure that the sample we select will generalize to our population of interest. So again, research begins with a general question about the population, and then here's our population of interest, the samples selected from that population, and they're a specific set of individuals that we hope represent that population. The study is conducted on that sample, and then the results we hope to generalize to that population of interest. The population is a large group of interest, and the sample is a small set of individuals who participates in that study.